guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Maria. I am the owner of Baffling Beads AT, a shop where I sell handmade beaded jewelry over on Etsy, and also a second shop where I sell check glass beads and brass supplies. If you're interested in any of my shops, please find the links down below. I always note them down in the description box. Today I want to show you how to make these small earrings, these ones. They are super beginner friendly. You basically only need a brick stitch to make these. I chose a shape that reminds of a fan. I think it looks quite interesting and quite elegant, and you can make them fairly quickly. So if you're new to beading and you're interested in smaller and more delicate designs, you may want to try these. Let's hop right into the tutorial, and first I will show you which kinds of beads you need, and then you can follow me along to bead these. First, let's check which bead types you will need for this design. So the very first row is made of Miyuki round beads 15-0. The second row is Miyuki Delica 11-0. Then you have a row of 3mm fire polished check beads. And then the last row is made of Miyuki round beads 15-0 and demi rounds 11-0 from the brand Toho, but you can also use Miyuki spacer beads, also 11-0. If you don't have demi rounds or spacer beads, you can also try to make this design with 15-0 Miyuki round beads all in the last row, but then of course the tips won't be as prominent as you can see it here, because Miyuki round beads 15-0 will be a little smaller than those demi rounds. If you're interested in color information, I don't disclose color codes in this tutorial, but if you would like to get this information, please check out my jewelry shop, whether there's a digital download for these earrings. If you need help with your color choice for any of your earrings, you can always check out my jewelry shop where I sell digital downloads. These include 10 color code sets as well as bead graphs, so that you can play around and plan your own color choices. So about the beading supplies that you will need. As you can see, I use these brass findings. If you don't have any that you want to work with, or you're interested in buying these, you can check out my bead shop, the link is down below, if you're interested in purchasing a pair of these. Then of course you will need earring hooks. I use brass ones. Then I use Miyuki beading thread in the color Champagne, which quite nicely matches the brass color. This is size B. Then you will need those Miyuki rounds 15-0, Miyuki Delica 11-0, 3mm fire polished check glass beads, and then you either need Toho demi rounds 11-0, Miyuki spacer beads 11-0, or Miyuki round beads 15-0 of your choice. I choose 2 different shades of Toho demi rounds. Next, you will need to cut 1 arm length of thread. And you take your finding and you will tie a double knot at one of those ends. You will leave some tail thread so that you can tie 1 or 2 knots in the end and hide the thread in your beadwork. You push it to one end, like this. Now you thread your needle and we can start with the beading. The whole design pretty much consists of brick stitches, so it should be pretty easy for you to follow along. If you want to learn more about the brick stitch, please check out the tutorial video on the brick stitch on my channel. But it's not necessary to watch that one for this tutorial. So let's start. As I've mentioned before, the very first row is made of Miyuki rounds 15-0, so you will pick up 2 of those. You push them down to the finding. Go from the back to the front through that finding. You make a tight stitch, so you go back through both beads. You pull tight. And you place both beads tightly next to each other. And then you go up through that second bead. And you pull tight. So because we want our design to have a look like a fan, you want to achieve with all your bead rows that the next on top always sticks out a little more to both sides. So for our first bead row, this means that these beads need to stick out a little more than the edge of the finding. So you can push them a little bit to the outer edge. And then we continue with the brick stitch. You pick up another 15-0. Go from the back to the front through that finding. And up again through that same bead. Push a little, like this. Pick up another one. From the back to the front. Up again through that bead. And you pull your thread. And we continue until we're at the other side of the finding. Now I need to add another bead so that the last bead sticks a little out on the right hand side of that finding. Like this. So this is the first row. We now continue with the second row, for which we use those Miyuki Delica 11-0 beads. Again, another brick stitch, a tight stitch, and instead of using the second thread bridge like we usually do, we use the very first one so that the first bead on our needle sticks out to the right hand side. So we take the first thread bridge, we make another tight stitch, so we go back through both beads, you pull tight, and then you go up with that second bead. like this. And it sticks out, as you can see. So now we continue the usual way. You pick up one bead, you go from the back to the front below that second thread bridge, you pull through, and you go up through that bead. Pick up another bead, you take the next thread bridge, pull through, and you go up through that same bead. And again. Okay, we're now at the end. We don't have another thread bridge, but we still need to add another bead. So we take up one, and then you go from the bottom to the top through that last Milky Delica bead you just added, and you place that next bead right next to that second last bead. Go down through the bead on the left hand side, and then through the second last Miyuki round bead on the first row. You go up through that Miyuki round bead next to it, and you go up through that very last Miyuki Delica bead. Like this. So now we need to add the row of check beads. And because these check beads are so wide, we use the second thread bridge again. Because of their width, they will still stick out on that side. So we pick up one 3mm bead, one 15/0 key round bead, and another 3mm bead. This is going to be a loose stitch, so we go through the second thread bridge, and we go directly up through that second 3mm bead. We don't want these beads to sit too tightly because of this tiny Miyuki round bead in between. I turn it over, and then I will keep on adding 15/0 beads and 3mm beads. So you pick up one 15/0, one 3mm, go through that next thread bridge, pull through, and you go up through that 3mm bead only, like this. So depending on which brand your 3mm check beads are from, these will be a little smaller or larger. These beads are from Rutkowski, so they are pretty large for 3mm beads. So I will only use 8 for this row. If you use other brands, which may be a little smaller, you may want to use 9 beads for this row. So because I don't want these beads to sit too tightly next to each other, I sometimes skip a thread bridge between those Miyuki Delica beads. So you either want 8 or 9 3mm beads in this row. So again, I pick up a 15/0 and a 3mm bead. And I will add them with another brick stitch. So I will now skip a thread bridge. So that is the third row. And now I will add those demi rounds to this earring and shape those little tips. So for the edge I pick up a 15/0 and a demi round. And I will go through that next 15/0 on that very last row. And you want to have them sit like this. Now I will always pick up bead groups of 3. So always 3 demi rounds or spacer beads, or maybe 15/0s for you. Depends on your bead choice. When I've picked them up, I will go through that next 15/0 bead. And you will place those beads in between those 15/0 beads. You pick up 3 beads again. And you will add them to that last row. And for that last bead group, you will again pick up a demi round and a 15/0 or 2 15/0s, depends on you. And then I will go through the last 3mm check bead and the last Miyuki Delica bead. Like this. And now we will shape the tips. So for this we will need to get back up to that very last row. For this you go up through that next Miyuki Delica bead on the left hand side. And further up through that 3mm check bead. We will now shape the tips by skipping the center bead of those bead groups of 3. So for this you always want to go through the 15/0 Miyuki round bead that was initially placed between those 3mm check beads. And then you will always go through the first and the last bead of your bead group of 3. So for me, that's the dark demi rounds. For you, those might be 15/0 round beads. So I pull my thread through that first demi round. Then I go through the last demi round and that Miyuki round bead in the middle of those 3mm check beads. Then again you will take the first bead of that next bead group of 3 For me that's the dark demi-round. And you want to pull tight so that the center bead of your bead group sits on top of that thread bridge. Then again I go through the last demi-round of that bead group and that 15-0 Miyuki round bead in between those 3mm check beads. You take the first bead again of that bead group and you pull tight. Now you continue like this. You are now coming out of this last 15-0 Miyuki round bead in between those last two 3mm check beads. And now the only thing that we need to do is place knots. So for this, I turn over the earring. I go down through both the 3mm bead and Miyuki Delica. I go up to the next Miyuki Delica, and I will now always place my knots in between Miyuki Delica and 3mm check bead so that I can pull in the thread into that 3mm check bead. So place a knot there in between those two beads. And then you go up to the 3mm. You pull in that knot. And that's the first one. Now you go with that 15-0 in between those 3mm beads. And down again with that 3mm and the next Miyuki Delica bead. You go up again with a Miyuki Delica bead on the left hand side. And you place another knot in between the Miyuki Delica bead and that 3mm check bead. You go up and you pull in that knot. Now I will cut that thread. So now the working thread is secure. I will now take a thinner needle, just because those 15-0 beads are pretty small and I don't want to shatter them by accident. So now I will go up with the very first Miyuki round bead I placed on that finding to pull in that double knot. I go further up through that Miyuki Delica bead. And then I place another knot between that 3mm bead and Miyuki Delica bead. And I go up again to pull in that knot. Then you cut your thread. So these are the earrings. You will now need to add that earring hook and then you're all done. So here I have the finished pair. This is how they look. I never disclose color information in my tutorial videos. If you're interested in bead graphs and information about the beads that I use for my own designs, that I sell in my shop and that I show in my tutorial videos, if there is not already a digital download available in my shop, always feel free to ask for one if you're interested, to let me know that there's interest there and that people would like to purchase this information. My digital downloads usually include bead graphs, so usually it's empty ones so that you can color them yourself, a numbered one and a color-coded one, and also 10 sets of color information, so that if you need help with the color choice and bead choice, that you can purchase the download and know which beads to buy. I do not include supply information for beads because usually you can buy all kinds of seed beads, you know, all over the internet. Just buy where it's cheapest for you, and maybe you have bead shops that are local to you, so I would stick to those. If you need a shop where you can buy metal supplies or the check beads that I use, please check out my bead shop down below. I always try to include those supplies in the product range. So this video will be available sooner than the digital download. I will try to upload the download in the next 2 to 3 weeks, so by the end of this year. If you're interested in that download, please check out my jewelry shop where I sell those downloads, including bead graphs and my color information. I will also include the color information for these. So if you're interested in these pink ones, you know where to get that information. If you have any further questions, please leave them down below. I will reply to them. But that's it for now. I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, that you found it helpful. Maybe it's the right project for you to try out beading. Let me know. If you liked this video, please consider leaving a like or a comment, and maybe even subscribing if you're interested in my beading tutorials or my vlogs where I show the behind the scenes of my small business. So for now, I'm off. Hopefully I will see you in the next video, and I wish you a great day. Bye!